My name's Matt, and I will be talking to Jochen Issing about leadership insights, team dynamics, and continuous learning. So we are at the point that we are talking about the education, and what interests me a lot, you have the PhD in philosophy, right? So I'm just wondering, like, why?
That's a fair question, I guess. So I was working at Fraunhofer for quite a while. Fraunhofer is a research institute in Germany. It's probably best known for things like video coding and audio coding, but like it has all kinds of disciplines actually. So it's a really, really broad institute, probably the biggest research institute in Europe, roughly like that. And I was in the institute for MP3 audio coding, even though MP3 was long done before I joined. And I was working there for a couple of years. It's actually following the tariff system. So eventually, like you only get limited contracts. Eventually, you have to change your contract. And doing a PhD was actually like a possibility. So my institute actually offered me to do it because they actually had interest in keeping me, and they wanted to actually offer me like another job also after the PhD. So that they said, hey, don't you want to do a PhD? And I always wanted to do a PhD because I always, I kind of look out for challenges in a way. And the only thing that actually kept me thinking was that it's like financially, it's like even less than the tariff system in Fraunhofer. But I said, well, it's a chance and I'll take it. And let's see if I can make it. And that was the thing that brought me to the PhD in the first place, I would say. And it was a challenge, and I actually didn't finish in the original time frame. I actually took it to Sweden with me, and I finished it in the evenings. And I think 2.5 years or so after the original time frame, I managed to close it as well. So, yeah, it was a tough one, but I'm happy I did it. And also, ever since I finished it, I anyways don't really use the title in that sense. But also in the job, the title itself or the education itself, I wouldn't say it didn't make any difference. But what did make a difference is what I learned in terms of like academia work ethics, kind of, right? So what does it mean to do research? What does it mean to write papers? It's like a certain diligence that you apply to your work. And it's like a good practice in like technical reasoning as well. And I think I drew from that experience quite a bit. And I still do it today. Even though like the day-to-day reasoning in management and leadership is sometimes not necessarily the same as you do in a scientific paper. But still, like similar principles.
And you said something which is not popular, especially here in Germany, to be honest. Yeah, you said like you have the title, you have a PhD, you don't care about so much about the title, but maybe about what you did because of this title, like the research and so on. But in my experience in Germany, especially, I worked for BMW for a while, and everybody who had a PhD, they were really like emphasizing that, and this was like a huge part of their career. So if this is what I understood, so if you want to make the career in the engineering side, you need to have the PhD. And this was what I heard here in Germany. So you are the first German guy saying this is, you haven't done it for the title, it's not so important.
I'm very happy that you have me here, that I can also show a different perspective on what Germans can do, how Germans can be. But yeah, it's probably like a special kind of ecosystems. To be frank, like I joined the automotive world without ever feeling like that, yeah, I'm an automotive guy. And I must admittedly say that I kind of despise like the style that sometimes the industry was representing itself, like very, very proud, very, very, yeah, sometimes a bit arrogant, I would say. I don't think it's necessarily still the case, and I think that I probably exaggerated my perspective there back in the days, because now I know a lot of guys that actually were in the automotive industry, but they're everything but arrogant. So I had to I had to learn that as well. But yeah, I think there are actually many people like I described. I could totally tell from also the friends I had and the colleagues that I had at university. Many do it mostly for the challenge, I would say. Maybe not all of them. We had a couple of folks from from the automotive industry, and maybe they were following that path. Yeah, now I know what they do.
And you work in the automotive industry, especially regarding autonomous cars for the last 6-7 years, more or less, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think so, yeah.
So I'm just wondering, because I recently read an article about the Titan project from Apple. So they wanted to create autonomous car, but they killed the project. So I assume it was not so... it was quite challenging to create a car. The Tesla, you have already those systems to help you with the autonomous driving and support you while driving. But I'm just wondering, like, how do you think here in Europe or in Germany when we'll see finally like a fully autonomous cars, or this is still hard to say?
It's definitely hard, and I had no clue when I joined AID back in the days. I was even surprised, like, what do you guys want from me? Like, I don't do autonomy and autonomous cars, and like I don't even know like much about cars. I actually ate cars, so I'm a bicycle rider by heart, like big time actually. But yeah, they didn't care about that, and I'm actually happy that they didn't. So I just looked it up. I started 2018 at AID. So
6 years.
Pretty good, yeah. Good testament. Thank you. Just yesterday evening, I wondered which year do we have now. So now you can imagine how good I am with knowing all the dates. Yeah. So when I started at AID, I learned pretty quickly that like this problem that the industry is trying to tackle is pretty hard, and like we have to use all kind of support technologies to make it happen. It's not that well, that's what I originally thought it would be, like that you like build a car, you add a couple of sensors, and then the car can see the world and then can make decisions, right? It's unfortunately not that easy. Even though Tesla is trying to approach it maybe a bit like that, but there is actually a lot of more information that is coming, and actually also Tesla is using that. So like the collection of data, the creation of HD maps, like the like this, like all of these things, they need to be slowly built up. And there is always this, it's actually, I think, a classic nowadays, the long tail in autonomous driving, right? So like whatever technology you build, there might still be edge cases that you don't fully cover. And I think that kind of alludes, or yeah, that leads to the solution that we will have to wait for actual autonomous cars, how we imagine them today, for a long, long time, I would say. But I could totally imagine that within certain ODDs, like certain limited, maybe sometimes fenced areas, maybe like slower speeds and so on, which is also happening, right? You can see that there, I think in the special purpose areas, that is where this high quartz revolution is going to take off. And then for like this full self-driving capability stuff where you don't need anything, the car just drives itself. Right now, I see it rather as like an approximate goal eventually in eternity. But yeah, that's the tough thing. So we have to address it, and it's actually not that hard to imagine, because even as humans, you cannot drive everywhere, right? Go to I don't know, Poland is maybe not that different from Germany, but go to China, and will you just sit in a car and drive safely in China as a German or Polish guy? Probably not, I guess. I wouldn't dare, actually. I was actually afraid to death when I first came to China and sat in a taxi. So I wouldn't dare to drive there, let alone cycling. So it's actually a tough problem. And it has a lot of edge cases, and so I think we'll have to be patient. But yeah, I think the industry also shifted a bit away from this Big Bang solution, right? Where we just build a robotaxi and off you go and everything's fine, right? Waymo is still like on that track, but I think they can do it because first of all, they also limit their ODD. It's visible also from the videos, and while they just sit on a seemingly infinite amount of money, right? So that is also a good driver for building stuff, technical stuff. But not everybody has that. And the others, they have to build intermediate products. And that means like driver assistance systems and going through the different levels one by one, building something profitable that you can sell, so that you can keep going building stuff for the company. Yeah.
And you mentioned the interesting thing that this is a lot about the data. So you're collecting a lot of data and you kind of need to interpret those data to kind of adapt to the external circumstances and to drive the autonomous car. But how do you see the AI and current large language models, right? Does it like somehow help? Do you see some kind of implementations that might be helpful in case of autonomous driving?
So definitely I'm super impressed by all the progress that is happening, like all the generative AI products that are hitting the ground these days. I'm using them all as much as I can because I'm really, really thrilled by it. I think, well, of course, large language models probably won't drive a car, but the artificial intelligence models, they are really closing the gap, I think, in many technologies, and they're also pushing the boundaries. The only thing that we'll have to tackle there is for things like vehicles or cars in general. Like we're talking about vehicles that weigh a ton, and if they smash into anything, they create a big disaster, right? So you have to prove that whatever they do or however they behave is safe, and they don't harm anything. That's really tough, and especially with AI models where I'm not an AI expert, but with the hallucinations that you see with the large language models, the certain unpredictable behaviors that you see with some networks, right? Like for human perception, they're still pretty good, right? But to actually prove that this system is safe is a very, very different story. And it's also different in a way because if you sell a car, the responsibility is with the driver, right? And you cannot prove that every person on the planet is driving safely, right? You probably cannot even prove that every person that has a driver's license is driving safely, right? But the responsibility is anyways not with the driving school, I guess, but with the driver. But when you sell a product that has artificial intelligence on it, then the responsibility is with the vendor, right? With the OEM, and then they want to really prove that the product is safe and it only behaves as desired in all possible circumstances, and that's a pretty tough thing. Also, like cars, they don't see like we do. All right, even the AI networks, at least the ones that I saw. So as a driver, when I drive my car, I see like moving objects in a way. I can like immediately classify them as humans, as trucks. For me, often it's enough that, oh yeah, it's a big moving object or it's a small moving object, right? But it's not working necessarily like that with the networks. And like moreover, I can actually tell from the pose of the person and the way how it's walking. Is that person drunk? Is it like a child? Is it like unstable in its walking style? Is it likely that the person will actually enter the street, or will it actually go the other way? It's like there are so many subtle pieces of information that are attached to these interactors that you can actually perceive as a human, but the car cannot do that yet. So it has to actually take a couple of assumptions. And so the actual building of that product is very different to the way how we actually drive our cars.
During the discussion between us to discuss like a potential topics for our today's interview, I got the impression that the infrastructure is something kind of interesting for you. But like when I hear the infrastructure and I imagine myself the infrastructure in my mind, I have something like completely opposite feeling, that I don't see it like super sexy or interesting topic.
Yeah, well, welcome to my world. I know what you mean, and I'm super happy that we can talk about infrastructure, because this is where I'm coming from, or what I've been doing for the past 6 years. Oh, whoa! Elia is trying to eat your microphone. That's not good. We have a dog with us, so we have to fight it while we're talking. It's just like an additional challenge here. When I started the ID, I mentioned it earlier in a private conversation that I was supposed to actually help with the sensor interfacing, but in the build system team itself, like we call it engineering process actually, there were a couple of people missing, and I said, yeah, well, maybe I help out a bit, but not for long. And yeah, well, that was my last word about that, I guess. So I stayed in the infrastructure business ever since, and I'm still in there today. So for me, infrastructure is really like the whole, like all the tooling, all the ground on which everything is built, and not only the dumb tools, but also the integration of AI models, right? Like if you want to have this inference of the networks, so like you apply the network in your product, there is so much infrastructure that needs to happen, and the actual like model tweaking and model training and so on. Even for the experts that work on the ML integrations, it's not like the only work that they do, right? They don't only do network tweaking, but there is already there a lot of infrastructure that needs to work. Like all the sensor data needs to be merged highly efficiently, needs to find its way to the actual network. It has to be super reliable. Also, the sensor. You have to also make sure that the failure modes are captured in the sensors and so on. So there is so much infrastructure out there. While in my world, infrastructure is everything, but I think in a product like an autonomous car or truck, like we do it here, it's easily 90% in my opinion. So yeah, well, maybe not as much, but it's a huge part, and I think that is something that many people don't see or actually miss. And something that is also, as you say, it's not necessarily sexy, right? So infrastructure sounds boring, but it's extremely powerful, and it's also exciting, and it has its own challenges. Yeah, you can even do it with a PhD in computer science. And it's still interesting. It's still exciting.
So what you're saying, like the really good infrastructure is important. Probably it's super important to reach the company goals. As you said, it's like a backbone. I assume that this might be a bit difficult to explain maybe to the business stakeholders that this is such a crucial part of the business, and especially here, right? Like in the company which you are or previously worked.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, here in this company, I have the benefit that I already knew the people that are in like the positions that like in the positions that have the power to decide like where do we move people and who gets how much headcount for like all the issues that we need to solve. In previous companies, we had to learn it the hard way because the thing with infrastructure is that it's actually invisible. You don't see it as long as it works. And that's also one of the tough things as an infrastructure person, that you have to actually show your progress very actively. And when I said we learned it the hard way, what I meant is that the build system that we have been working on, which was like the most critical part of the build of the infrastructure, it was slowing down a lot, right? And if the build system is slowing down and you have something like a monorepo where everything is in one large repository, right? And every single developer depends on that build system to be fast, then suddenly like everybody in the company realizes there is some problem there, and like, can't we fix this somehow? And then like the obvious solution is, yeah, well, we have to actually build the tooling that supports the load that our build system and our overall ecosystem that we, like the engineering system that we build, needs to handle. And that requires like really, really high quality tooling, like scaling tooling as well. If you can imagine that you need to handle like millions of lines of codes. You need to handle like thousands of builds a day. Like very diverse builds as well, like simulations in addition to sanitizers, in addition to static analysis, in addition to like the plain compilation and all the different languages that we're talking. So it's a highly complex system, and it requires like really good engineering. And lucky for us, Google has actually paved the way for us with a lot of tooling. And we can reuse that tooling and learn from it and apply these principles also to all the new things that we add to the build system and the infrastructure in general, especially the scaling one. As soon as the company once went through such downtimes, so we had like a severe situation in NID, we had a severe situation in Argo, where actually when the build system is down and every developer stares at the wall, like it's a huge fire and everybody's running around and trying to solve things, and it's really, really stressful situation. And that usually sticks with people. And then you also make sure that you build the right stuff with the right quality. So yeah, I'm in a lucky position now that I have the people around me and the people in the decision maker situations that positions that we get the support that we need, actually.
And talking about the complex solutions, and I think like for complex solutions, you need to build like really high performing team. So like I'm just wondering, what is your approach to building those things? What is important for you?
I used to play handball, actually, so I'm like a team sports person. And for me, it's, you know, the saying, like if your tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So for me, every team is like a sports team. I can recognize that maybe not everybody agrees with me on that, but I totally see it like that. So far, I think it actually is a really, really good analogy. And there are a couple of things there. So if you have a really, really well-oiled team, it feels like a super developer to me. So it's almost like a person that you can interact with, and doesn't matter what you throw at it. It always creates like a high quality, super stable, and exactly right-sized outcome. That has some resemblance to a team, I would say, right? Like with football or handball, what matters is the ball. How does the ball get to the front, and how do you get it into the goal, right? And there is so much work that is done around like that goal that starts with defense, that starts with the interactions between the individuals, that starts with understanding all the skills that everyone has in your team, and playing with those skills and making your decisions based on those skills, and actually also pushing each other a bit, and like in a positive way, and supporting each other. Whenever there is a mistake being done, like somebody else is helping out, right? And it's not about the individual, but it's about the ball, getting the ball as close to the goal as possible. And with everybody working together, it's really hard to actually win against a team that is playing really well together. And like if you look at that picture, then there are so many parallels to like what does it look like if a team is high performing, and I draw from this a lot. And so I look a lot at the interactions that the team has, how people are working with each other, also how do people react when maybe a certain person is not in the room versus when it is in the room. Do we have psychological safety? Can we say what we think? And how do people actually react when we say what we think, right? And how well do we actually know each other in a way that we can also make decisions for the other in a way. I will maybe like come to that in a moment. But it's such a powerful analogy that I really come back to it all the time. And so far, what I heard as feedback from the teams, it works really, really well. And people really enjoy like a good teamwork. That's my basic principle, how I do it, I would say.
And as a leader, I'm wondering, who is your partner in crime? So you work as a guy for the engineering, like responsible for engineering side. So regarding the strategic ideas or like new initiatives, like with whom usually you work or crush your ideas to see if they make sense?
That's a good question, actually. I must say, partner in crime. I don't necessarily have like an individual that is my partner in crime. I actually I try to use like almost everyone to bounce ideas with, to also express my worries or my concerns, and then think about like how should we do things instead, and what should we do instead. And then even if I have a clear picture, I don't necessarily execute, but I try it out on a couple of people. Like, hey, like, what do you think? Should we do it like this or that? Right? So I really try to like outsource it as much as possible, or crowdsource it almost. So there are very few things that actually don't go through the team that I decide, or like, well, decision is then actually no longer really my decision, right? If I let it go through the team, then like everybody decides. But I really try to be super transparent actually with everything that I do, as long as it's not damaging to anyone. Of course, it's a slippery slope, right? You can never really tell like that somebody doesn't feel like offended by it, but I rather try to err on the side of being rather more transparent than not, and then I sometimes need to tackle the problems that I created. But overall, it's everybody around me, and everybody also has, it's similar to what I said in the beginning, or like when you asked me about the high-performing teams, like everybody has skills, right? And the more you know people, the more also you know what you can ask them and what their experiences are. Then you also build an intuition in terms of what things can you discuss and what could be like a great outcome. even though sometimes I just try something, I just ask a stupid question. Even sometimes, even though I know it's stupid, just to like get people talking, right? It's very easy that they tell me, yeah, that's completely wrong, right? Like your idea is shit, and I really enjoy that if people actually open up and tell me that I'm wrong, especially when I knew that I was wrong, of course. So maybe the other way around is not as pleasant. But anyways, I have to survive this. It's part of the game, I think. We have to have open exchanges, and very often I don't see things that the team sees. And then we are not going into like analysis paralysis or so, or discussing things forever. We use time boxes. We say, hey, we need to decide, right? One time I even had a situation where the team and we couldn't decide, and then I said, hey, let's throw a dice, right? And it was fine, right? We just moved on because we didn't know which decision was better, so any decision was as good as the other. And actually, yeah, it also turned out to be fine, right? And so I try to not make a big deal out of decisions when it's not necessary. And when we have time, and we usually have time, because when we're good prepared, like we gather the data, and then we can also make decisions together usually. I know that a lot of people are a bit worried about like having big debates with the whole team and so on. But it's really also about how you approach such decisions, right? It's not that I make a big brainstorming session with inviting 16 team members and then ask them, what do you think? Like, how should we approach it? Of course, I make my homework. I think about like, what should we do? And then I make proposals. And like then you pretty quickly learn if your proposal was good or not, because they will take it apart as quickly as possible. And if they don't take it apart, then you at least have the assurance that, okay, it's not completely off. So we can actually iterate over this, and then you iterate over it as long as you need to get enough confidence to say, all right, let's try this, let's do this. Even then, it's not necessarily settled in stone, right? You can still adjust. It's like what we always do. We do software anyways. We can adjust. But like this is my partner in crime, I think. Like it's the people around me, and I have like truly good people around me, and I'm very happy to have them. And actually that's a good point. I once heard the proverb that you are the average person of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. So I try to surround myself with smarter people than I am, so I can eventually like catch up to them. And so far I've been pretty successful in terms of surrounding me with people that are smarter than me. I draw from that, I would say.
So what you said, it brings me to the question that I wanted to ask you. So you said about the crowdsourcing or outsourcing the decision making, and like being transparent with the people, having like a bright minds around, which is like, I think it's like a huge lesson learned as a leader, that you don't have to know everything, that you can ask other people, you can have ego in your pocket, you can ask for help, right? Because this is not the obvious thing. And I'm just wondering, like, about your lessons learned, like your aha moments in your career as a engineering leader.
So I think like in a very, very small thing, actually, where I felt a lot of time that it was a good lesson, actually, is when I thought, oh, I don't have to go like run this through the team. I think this is a safe bet. Let me just like send this out. It almost never worked. Like almost every time there was something super stupid in it. And I just thought like, why did I not even just let someone read through it, right? Just a review. Like we do this all the time with code, right? Like, and it doesn't take that long. Just show it to someone. And that's what I actually do a lot. When I say I outsource the decision, it's maybe also a bit of an exaggeration, I would say, but it's more like, I try to come up with something sensible, and then I share it, and then I ask, hey folks, do you see anything wrong with this? And then usually I get a couple of thumbs up. Well, I hope. And then someone says maybe, hey, what do you mean with this? This is unclear, or I don't think this is actually true. You should probably change it in that way. And like these things are usually done within a few minutes, and then you can just forward it. So whenever I thought I don't need to run it through the team, I actually learned that I should have. And especially like decisions around like personal changes, in a sense when you like you make someone as a manager. It doesn't hurt actually to ask everyone in the team when you share your thoughts and say, hey, actually I'm thinking about like making that person a manager. What do you think? And please be honest, right?
Mm.
It's like what happens in the one-on-one stays in the one-on-one. So that is super important to me as well, that we have those honest conversations. And usually, like for the most part, what I heard actually that was that people say, yeah, well, he is anyways already acting like a manager, so you can also make him officially the manager. And this is like the easiest way ever, I think, to make a manager of a team. Doesn't always work, right? You not always have like high quotes manager material in a team. It's not only that the people need to be able to do it, but they also need to want to do it. So it doesn't always apply, but when it does, I think it's really useful. And I always wanted to actually interview my manager before they joined. I actually never had the chance to do it. And if my team listens now, they probably will quote me on that. But if I think I would like to hire a manager only also if the team improves, but because the team and the manager interactions are like what is building the foundation of trust in a company, and that has to be really well oiled, in my opinion. And so I should do that as well, like even drive that through the team and not make that decision on my own. I think that is maybe the biggest learning, even though they were all small pieces, but adding them all together, I think they form the foundation for what I'm doing mostly. What I also learned is that, and maybe that's obvious for everyone, but I still wanted to mention it. So like this psychological safety thing, or being able to say whatever you want, and it's safe. It doesn't start with saying everything that you think, right? It just like it has a certain order to it. So you have to first lay a foundation of trust, and being able to say what you want, or being able to speak your mind completely freely, is only a symptom of like really, really like well-established psychological safety. I must say I sometimes remind myself of that, painfully at times. But that's also something that we always have to keep in mind when we communicate. We are moving, especially as managers or leaders in general, we are moving between different teams, and we have to actually be able to play the role appropriate to the situation in which we are. Especially it's hard when you switch between different teams, when you switch between different groups of people that you have to communicate with. If you switch also between different culture areas. At Argo, for instance, we had a team in Palo Alto, a team in Pittsburgh, a team in Munich, and they all had very different dynamics. And it took a while until you could actually speak in the same way in the different teams. So yeah, that is also, I think, a skill that is super, super important to me. And I think that is something that I would recommend every person, every leader, every manager to really follow by and try to keep in mind that there is an audience, and the audience should drive what you say. Or at least how you say it. You still want to get a message across, but it can be perceived very differently. Yeah. Recently, a colleague of mine said that they read that the Germans don't embellish. So in Germany, you don't meet someone and say, "Hey, how are you doing?" And then the other person, "Great, and how are you doing?" Right? It's more like, "Hi," and you come to the point, right?
Yeah.
Like, no fumbling around, no beating around the bush, bam. And if you say hi and then like make your statement and you do that in the US, it's perceived very, very differently, right? Also, of course, depending on the other person. If the other person comes from Europe in the US, it's again different. But so like having some sense of the other person in the room is like super, super important. And it's also something that I probably will never stop learning how to do it.
And the last question, but not least, I'm wondering any books, resources, I don't know, conferences that were particularly influential on yourself, on your journey as a leader?
Yeah, I read like all the books that I found around agile development in the early areas of agile development. Well, early ages. It's the early ages that I learned about it. So that was already far after it was invented. Like the classics there is what I really, really loved is coaching agile teams. It's one of the best books I think for actually it's for agile coaches, but I think it's just as applicable also to managers. Something that is very different from that, but what I also really enjoyed is especially everything around like lean startup with Eric Ries. It really struck a chord with me. And actually, the book that is, in my opinion, like moving the needle even further in that direction is the Product Development Flow from Donny Reinertsen. The Product Development Flow is more about assessing like product development situations, right? Making proper decision, trying to establish proper procedures, processes, practices in particular. Whereas coaching agile teams is much more around how do you behave as a coach, as a manager, as a scrum master. And actually, there is another book. It's actually my favorite book. It's Culture Code from Daniel Coyle. Mm-hmm. And that is actually about teams and how they interact and how high performing teams are composed. And I always had like an argument with my previous boss about like command and control. I totally hate command and control, as you can imagine maybe now after our conversation. And he said, yeah, but there are situations where you totally need command and control. Like with like firefighters, right? You can't say like, hey, there is a fire over there, and then everybody start thinking about, yeah, but what do we do, right? And I totally disagreed, and it took me really long to actually be able to assess the situation and to phrase my opinion about it, because I also saw that, yeah, he has a point, right? It's not a good idea to just stand around and then scratch your head and then wondering, what should we do, right? But then I also read the book, The Culture Code, and the book goes through several team compositions. It starts with like kindergartners, like teachers in the kindergarten, how they interact. Then it went through like pilots that interact in the cockpit of a crashing airplane. And then like a group of thieves, right? So very diverse, very like extremely different areas of like teams in particular. Also, I think sports teams is also part of it. And then one of the team formations, and I was super happy about that, was actually like a group of soldiers. I think it was Navy SEALs or Marines. I'm not honestly sure. But there is probably no higher definition of like a command and control team than like a team of soldiers, right? Like this is my stereotype of like this is command and control. And then the author described like how that team actually practiced and how they trained and how they pick. I think Simon Sinek is actually using their principles of how do you pick a new team member. How much is it about the performance and the skills, and how much is it about the trust? And like they also have these retro sessions where they optimize, and they seem to be really, really rough, those retro sessions. So they're really, really honest. I don't actually want to be there when it happened, but it like there was nothing command and control. It was really, really like for me satisfying. Of course, I immediately bought a book and I gifted it to my boss. Like, here, read this. I don't know if you read it in the meantime. But they did all through like training, direct feedback, and it didn't matter who gave the feedback, right? If you're like a soldier and then you do a practice session, right? They actually were the I think they were Navy SEALs. They were the team that actually captured. Oh wow! And they practiced that situation over and over, like with all kinds of constellations. And like after every practice, they came together and they discussed it again. And like everybody had the same voice in there. So yeah, that is my example of this is what I think works. And I so far am working really well with it. So I think the teams, like if you treat them as adults, they also behave like adults. That is one of my guiding principles as well. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. I think the last sentence, it's like a good dot at the end of the sentence of our interview. So thanks, Jochen, for all the thoughts, lessons learned. And
thanks, Leland. Thanks for having me. It was my pleasure.
Better Tech Leadership powered by Brainhub. Follow Les Schick on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Better Tech Leadership newsletter.